right. Hello, Jamal.
What's up, AR?
Not bad. How are you?
What's up that's not the right answer to what's up.
What did I say?
You said not bad. What's up is like,
Really?
Yeah.
What's up? Not bad.
What's up? Like, what's happening? You can't say, I'm good when someone says what's happening.
What do you? What am I meant to say? What am I meant to say?
You're supposed to say mango bars is
Not
going
much.
tank.
Not much. That's my
okay.
answer.
If you want to be like, vague about it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Before we sat
Sorry,
down.
I'm not a control freak. Just want to put it out there.
You're not bad.
I'm not good bad?
I don't know. Anyway, before we sat down to have this conversation, you told me a nugget of information that I want to start with.
Okay.
Which is, because I was like, oh, Jamal, I'd love to have you on the podcast because you have, and this is where I'm going to introduce you.
Okay.
You have a list of, what do you call them, accomplishments. You are a musician, solo musician, and a producer. You are also part of the band Tonight Us.
Yeah, now defunct, but yes.
But, okay, yeah.
Huh.
You also run and are the founder of True Brew Records.
That's correct.
And you run the studio that is True Brew as a gig space as well.
That's right.
And now you are also getting into some filmmaking stuff.
That is correct.
And the news is that you have done a soft retirement from music.
Is it a soft one? Yeah, I suppose that you could call it that, yeah.
I mean, you said on the phone to me, you were like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to do my own projects whenever I feel like it. So I kind of felt like that was it's not a complete break.
It's not a complete break from music, yes, but it is a complete break from the commercial side of running a studio. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, explain it.
For example, the majority of work I was doing was work for hire. And that was how the studio was making its money and kind of staying afloat and then using that money to fund its own projects, so to speak. That is all over. The idea of like running a studio or running a center or an institution, dare I say, as a sort of central hub for music, that I think portion is over. But, I've been playing music since I was 13, and I don't think that is something that I can let go of. It's such an integral part of my life that, it's something that I do unconsciously, whether I'm producing or whether I'm playing or whatever, it's always going to be a part of my life. So I'm being very selective with the projects that I'm doing. For example, I'm still working with a very small number of bands. Actually, I'm working with one. I'm working with Towers right now on 2 of their singles. One is almost done. Second one we're going to do first week of September. And other than that, like everything that I'm doing musically is going to be something that I derive personal joy from or gives me some kind of creative satisfaction. Unlike doing work for hire, which is like, just pay me, I'll do whatever you want.
Right.
So that's kind of where the music scene is. And
what causes? Why?
I think it was a long time coming. I've been sort of asleep at the wheel for a while. I think after True Brew TV, I kind of really exhausted myself. It was 18 months of just having Zen Pirzada and I just having our, heads to the grinder, and just like the first 6 months we produced 4 videos a month, which is insane if I think about it retrospectively. And then we switched to 2 a month for the rest of the year. So for 18 years. And that was exhausting because I think I especially had expectations that I could take it places, but I think after having run it for that time, I realized that music is always okay, I don't want to say this. This is going to sound so discouraging for everyone, I don't want to say it that way. But for me, it just felt like I'd hit a brick wall, essentially. And I wasn't really feeling like creatively I had more space to grow within the sort of space that True Brew kind of made for itself. So as far as personal growth is concerned, I'm on a separate journey where that is. But as far as True Brew is concerned, that's for the most part on my back burner.
But True Brew as a gig space is still...
I don't know.
No, dude, don't say
know.
that.
Well, I'll be really honest. Post-COVID, how our sort of event space is supposed to function.
Pakistan is COVID-free now. Have you heard the news?
Yeah, I got a phone call from a friend today saying, "What the hell? Why aren't you doing gigs?" It's like, just because he just came back from a trip to the mountains. So just like because you escaped for a while, and now you think sab kuch khatam ho gaya, easy ho gaya, but nahi hua. Just because we've become numb to it doesn't mean that it's over.
Someone literally said to me the other day, like, "Shukr hai, COVID khatam ho gaya." I was like, "Are you sure?"
I got it in an email. But like the event space was never run as a money-making enterprise. It was always a side thing that I wanted to do for music in order to sort of help independent music grow. And I think it really was sort of a launching platform for that. But it was essentially being supported by the commercial side. And if that's gone, then I can't justify paying rent, bills, and all of that for that space. So, yeah. I
mean, for people who don't know, True Brew as a gig space has been like a pretty main part of the indie circuit for people. All of these indie bands kind of, I remember the first time I went, I was like, the sound is great, and it's a cool little cozy, nice, small little space.
Thank you.
And I love when you got that neon teacup in the background. That gave it a nice extra vibe.
Yeah.
So that's really sad news. Please don't do that.
I mean, look, if somebody wants to throw me a bucket load of money to run it, I'm happy to do so. I have a team in place, but they need to be paid. Where am I going to get that money from? I can't keep I need to sew this hole in my wallet.
Sure.
So for that reason, I think it becomes impractical. So if you guys really love it,
just a look.
Just the look is enough.
Okay, so what's next for you then? I mean, if you're doing a soft retirement from music, I'm going to keep calling it a soft retirement.
I like that. I like the sound of that. Yeah, it doesn't make it sound as harsh. It also makes it sound like maybe one day I might come back to it.
It's like Daniel Day-Lewis after every film, he's like,
I'm done. Also like Daniel Craig after every Bond film.
Yeah. He'll be 65 and he'll still be doing them.
So, I mean, roundabout, I think at the end of 2018, I started reassessing my life. I was having like flashbacks. What am I doing?
Yeah.
And I realized that I guess the things that bring me joy no longer did at that point. So I kind of had to look at the other things that I enjoy doing, because I am at heart a creator. My background is art school, and then music, and I've done theater as a kid. So there's sort of this whole gamut of performance art, I suppose, in a way. And the one thing that I never really had the confidence to explore was film. I think even when you and I spoke initially, there was always this idea of like creating some kind of narrative series around music, etc., a docu-series. So my fascination with storytelling has always been there in one form or the other, and I've always been obsessed with films. But never had the opportunity or the confidence to explore it. And so December 2018, I thought, well, I should be doing something about this. It took me like a good 3-4 months to like figure out what my options were. And I applied for a course at the New York Film Academy. It was a crash course in filmmaking. So they compressed like 6 months worth of coursework and practicals and things like that within 8 weeks. And you end up working on a film every week, so that's like,
oh, nice.
Yeah, but you work on more than 8 films, because you work on other people's films as well, but you do like your own projects that are 8, so you're working on roughly like 15-16 films within that time. So they really kind of, there's no time to sleep, and when you're not at the school getting tutored, you're writing your next film, and then the weekend comes and you're editing that film, and then Monday you have to present it. So it's like a constant cycle of that, and that really kind of throws you into the deep end. Sorry, so I kind of jumped forward. So I applied for that, and it was essentially to discover within myself if I had the ability to tell stories within a visual medium. And I really, really enjoyed the entire process, and like I kind of fell in love with it, and kind of always had an admiration for it. But I kind of discovered the depth of that when the course was happening. I was like, for the first time in my life, I was the first one in the class asking all that annoying person asking all the questions, miss. And then the last one to leave, and just constantly just emailing my professors and just asking people and just talking to everyone, and then watching a ton of YouTube videos, reading books, everything I could possibly do. I was like a sponge.
Nerd.
Total nerd, And academically, I've always been kind of rebellious, like I'm in any class mein jana, kind of shit like that. But it was funny because I saw this new side that was encouraged by how joyous the material made me feel. Like it just never felt like work, It just felt like this is exactly what I should have been doing.
Right.
And the only regret that I felt at that time was, what the hell didn't I do this earlier?
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
So, like growing up, it kind of made me realize how limited our curriculums are with respect to people who want to explore art or the arts, rather.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing close to a film program in any of the schools that I went to growing up in Lahore. There were, in fact, really sort of basic art programs, no music programs, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So everything, like even the theater and stuff that I did was all like extracurricular. It was never like, okay, you're going to get credits for all the work you're putting in after school to learn all these new skills, right? Whether that's direction or acting or screenwriting or playwriting, yeah, whatever. So that was the only thing that I kind of regretted. I kind of realized that the reward I was feeling from learning this new skill was unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And I think that really kind of culminated in a good final project, in my final film, which I'm now trying to send into festivals. I wanted to hold off because I was unsure what the COVID situation was, but I don't think I can wait an extra year. So now I'm going to be sending it out to festivals, and I've shared it to like a small community of filmmakers and people that I know and whose feedback I appreciate. And generally, the response has been very, very positive. I have imposter syndrome, so there's no way I'm going to give myself full credit. But yeah.
If it's an 8-week program, that is very strenuous.
Very
How bad was the first film you made compared to the product at the end?
Well, I'm never going to show it, so you'll never know.
Right.
Yeah. It was very, very basic in the sense that the first film you do is supposed to be.
It's like the first film was like he wakes up, turns off his alarm clock, goes and looks at himself, and that's every student film, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, mine also has that. But
but I did it
in my defense. It was a student film, whatever.
Yeah.
There's no alarm clock though. There is a nightmare sequence.
Okay.
So yeah, that's crucial to the story. So come on.
I think the first student film I made had something similar like that.
Yeah, I realized soon after when I finished it, like, just don't start your films with people waking up. Just don't do it. Everybody fucking does that.
Yeah.
Oops, can I curse?
Yeah, sure.
I can curse?
Yeah.
I've been holding back.
These guys might not give me any money in the future.
These guys?
Yeah, these guys.
मेरे frame में कोई sponsorship नहीं है except for maybe Road.
Yeah. Road.
So that's kind of so now basically the thing that I'm looking at mostly is developing original stories coming out of Pakistan, telling the sort of stories that don't generally get any kind of traction in our mainstream media or even sort of web media, or the sort of authentic Pakistani experience, the lived experience of all of us essentially growing up in this country, in this city. And then what that means and what the experiences are and what the limitations are, but also what the opportunities are, I suppose.
Sorry to interrupt, but what do you think that is? The lived, whenever people use that phrase, the lived Pakistani experience that we all have, I'm just like, I don't know what that means, because my experience is so vastly different to what someone else's experience would be.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to talk about.
Right.
The fact that you don't know means that these are things that are not being talked about. You may have a personal experience that's limited to your friend circle or the time you've spent here. So is mine, of course, on a purely subjective level. But when you start talking to people about their stories, and I'm talking about stories across the intersection of classes, everybody has a specific experience according to their circumstance growing up here, and adulting or whatever you want to call it. And those are very sort of small stories in a way, but they have a lot of heart. and that's kind of where I think the strength of that's where at least where my interest is, sort of low concept films that talk about people's struggles and their experiences growing up in Pakistan.
Right.
And isn't it fascinating? Wouldn't you want to know? Wouldn't you want to hear about the different kinds of people? I mean, I've been working in music professionally for 10 years, and there's so many stories to tell right there. So many of my friends have been working in corporate offices, for example. Somebody who's from more of a middle class background might have a very specific experience going to a certain kind of school, whether they're girls or boys, or they're some kind of minority or any kind of marginalized narrative. I think that's kind of where the strength of our experiences lies, and the strength of that storytelling lies.
Yeah. I mean, it's always weird because you talk about authenticity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And usually when people tell someone else's story, it just comes across as like horribly fake.
Mm-hmm.
At least this is what sometimes it seems to me. Like when you can tell maybe they haven't done their research, because I don't believe that you can only tell your own story. You can obviously empathize with someone else and tell their story, or tell another kind of story. But it's like when you see village life in dramas.
Yeah, it becomes a parody of itself. You draw material for your scripts from memory, from fact, from research, and all of those things combined, and if they're done right, can really make for a strong story and for strong characters. So, and that's really what it's about. It's about the pathos of, I want to say, the pathos of the Pakistani experience. That's like a good tagline for it.
Yeah.
But that's exactly it. Like, I have a very limited personal experience, but I do have a perspective, right? And if I'm writing a script, it's very hard to remove yourself. In fact, you should do the opposite. You should put your own heart in it. But to do that authentically means then you need to do your research. You need to talk to the right people.
Yeah. You have to put the work
see what
in.
their lives. Yeah, you have to put the work.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because what you think it might be like, your immediate kind of impression is not always the actual thing.
And you can play off of that. You can play off of the idea that perspectives change and impressions are different from the other side, and the grass is greener, and so on. And that can be a very strong story core. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to show the different sides and the different experiences that we have.
So your interest in filmmaking really was sparked by this 8-week course?
I think it was sparked by trying to figure out what the hell I wanted to do with my life. But I think it was pushed forward dramatically by that course, because it gave me the confidence. It gave me the yes that I needed. I can do this. This is something that I can be good at.
What did filmmaking give you that music wasn't able to?
Music is far more abstract in the way that it conveys a story. It's more immediate in terms of an emotion, I think. Whereas film is a visual medium, and it's primarily your main form of input is that visual stimuli. And from that, you wean the emotional core of it. So I think it kind of it doubles upon it. It's sort of the most emotional and most sort of immediate form of storytelling. Yeah, you watch something and you immediately have some
That's film. So weird, because music is what I would say the opposite.
Really?
Music is something that you listen to and you can't express why you feel a certain way about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe you could say the same about film, but film has certain, like, I guess this is me coming from, because I have a history of like filmmaking, so I see music as something like, wow, mysterious, kind of, I don't know how it's made, so it's kind of magic to me.
Yeah, I can understand that, but it's demystified for me entirely, right? And also from a personal perspective, a lot of times music is also far more divisive in that, genre-specific tastes can say, okay, well, this speaks to me, but this doesn't, whereas I think a story will inevitably have some kind of emotional impact on you, whether you agree with it, you disagree with it, whether you like it or you dislike it. It's going to turn you emotionally. There's just no way to avoid that, unless the film is so bad that you kind of pop out of that world and you're like on your phone or something. That notwithstanding, if you're actually watching the film and you're engrossed, there's no way that you won't feel something for it.
Right.
Whereas with music, you can tune it out. It feels to me like the auditory senses operate on a more subliminal level whereas the visual sense operates on a much more immediate, much more visceral,
Right.
and unignorable level.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. But the something that I really enjoy about filmmaking, and that also very much frustrates me, is that it's a team project. You can't really make. I mean, you can make a film on your own, but it's very part of the joy of making it is that you work with other people, you work with actors, you work with sound guys, cinematographers, whatever. But it's also incredibly frustrating because the great thing about just writing is that it's just you. You don't need. You just need a pen and paper. That's it. Whereas with filmmaking, there is this barrier of entry. That you need a camera, you need this, and sound, and editing systems, and all this, and this big team around it.
Yeah.
So what was that?
Many more moving parts.
Many more moving parts, which is joyous and also awful sometimes. So what was your experience with that?
Well, I mean, like, in a sense, everything that I've done so far has culminated in me working in film now. And if I look back at the idea of collaboration, I've always really enjoyed it. I've made a lot of music with a lot of different kind of people. Excuse me. And I think the process of allowing people to add to your work and make it something bigger than what you as one person can make is magical to me. Of course, there are caveats within that, but I've made music solo. I've made music with friends and people that I want to collaborate with, and I've always found the latter to be far more rewarding and to be far more stimulating. There is a sort of well, how would I put it? There is a sort of level of control that one enjoys when it's just you and your music making machine or whatever.
That's like pure creativity in some sense.
That can be in a way, yes. It's purely yourself if you're able to channel and have sort of an unfiltered connection to your instrument or your laptop or whatever you're using to make music. That is phenomenal. And there's something very tribal about it, for lack of a better word. I think something very, what's a better word for it?
That's a very problematic phrase.
Okay, you're going to have to edit that then.
I got you.
Is it? Why is tribal problematic?
I'm totally kidding. It's not.
I was thinking about it. There's something very, what's another word for... fuck it, I've forgotten.
You mean like at the base level?
Yes, exactly. There's a word for it. Come on, it's like on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, the point is that there's something very immediate about, like, if you're playing the drums, and you're at a certain level of skill, you're able to think on the fly. If you're playing the guitar, if you're playing the keyboard, you're kind of able to connect with your instrument in a way that's
instinctive?
Immediately.
No, it's not the word,
No, because it's learned in a way, right? But it's like conversation. You're kind of letting your thoughts flow into the instrument, and it's kind of giving you feedback, and there's that interaction, right? With film, obviously, it's much slower because you have several moving parts, and many factors depend on how the final product depends on the many factors that are involved. I've completely lost my train of thought.
It's all right. I think we got hung up on which word it was.
Yeah, that really derailed me. But okay, so just the idea that, collaboration, for me, I think there's something very magical about it. You do kind of relinquish control entirely. Okay, not entirely, sorry. Let me just rephrase that. You delegate or you relinquish some part of that control, and you allow people to do the best that they can in terms of their contribution. And somehow, some way, if you've made the right decisions as sort of the director of that project, you will come out with something that even is beyond your own imagination. And that is really sort of, I believe that's the most rewarding it can be.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about True Brew.
Why?
You don't like talking about it anymore?
No, sure. I can talk about it.
The reason is because, this is a music adjacent podcast, so and it seems like that was a pretty big thing.
It feels so far away,
Acha?
Yeah.
How long was it running as a gig space and as a studio?
Well, it really evolved from my initial idea for what it ought to be, and I think when you're starting out, things seem a certain way, but you soon kind of figure, well, that might not actually be the case. And so initially when I set up the studio, I thought it would be a record label.
Mm-hmm.
hence the name
True Brew
Records. Unfortunately, around the time that I actually started in 2009, but officially kicked it off in 2010. What ended up happening was that around 2009, or actually a little earlier than that, the gig scene started dying out. And TV channels that were supporting music started shutting down. So it was a real time of change, I suppose. The only real sort of beacon commercially was Coke Studio that had started in 2008. And that obviously had mixed reviews from musicians because some of them felt excluded and so, were fairly negative about it. Some were more positive, and I think kind of looking at it holistically, just going to throw one Coke Studio comment in there. I don't think it really benefited the music industry. It's not an industry. The music scene as such. I don't think it really did what it could have done. And I think that was sort of an injustice where the kind of support it could have given to a larger scene, it could have been the bastion of music for Pakistan had they had a larger vision for it. But that was never their intention. So you can't really fault them on not kind of having that intention. That's purely a subjective thing on the creator's part. Having said that, I wanted to support local music. I wanted to support an alternative idea of music in Pakistan, and not that I didn't like what was happening commercially, some of it was good, but I really felt there was more space for us to occupy outside of pop rock, which is sort of becoming,
or fusion,
the staple, or fusion, exactly. There's a very, even that fusion stuff is very sort of specific in its palette sonically. So even though I kind of started as, I would say, an indie rock producer, I sort of personally evolved in terms of the music that I was listening to and started getting more and more into electronic music and more into urban music, and different influences kind of started playing out. And so my selection for the people that I was supporting started changing over the years as well. And I think some people felt that we were too indie, but I guess that was the point, right? And indie sort of has become a stigma. It's funny because everything is cyclical. When I was growing up in the 90s, we had a plethora of rock bands that were playing covers of Pink Floyd, all the way up to 60s, 70s classic rock, all the way up to Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and contemporary rock. And that was kind of the sort of Lahore underground scene, right? That underground scene actually was where all of your stalwarts from the industry came. That's when the music channels came in, they said, okay, we're going to pick up all of these underground artists who are now writing original material and put them in the limelight. And so this idea of the culture and counterculture being cyclical kind of played out in front of my eyes. And
as in counterculture, people got picked up into the mainstream.
Into the mainstream, absolutely. And I think now is sort of the time when that sort of the counterculture of what is now called indie is coming into the mainstream. But it's not necessarily indie rock. It's more this sort of EDM and urban sounds. People like Manu and Abdullah Siddiqui, for example, they're sort of the torchbearers of that sound. But this is technically still underground, right? Still indie or whatever. But within the next several years, I think you'll see more of this coming into the mainstream. And it already has. It already is, sorry. But you'll see it become more of the mainstream. I have totally digressed.
Yeah, back to True Brew.
Where I was going. But so the initial idea was to record and release music digitally and figure out ways to develop income streams that could help support the studio and also the artists. That became more and more difficult because gigs started shutting down. The security situation wasn't such that was a possibility anymore. And so I kind of had to take a decision either to keep the studio running or to shut it down. And if I had to do the former, then I'd have to switch my main source of income. So instead of recording bands and asking them to pay for the services of the studio and my production services, I started going into the commercial side. So working on primarily commercials and as many films and documentaries as I could get, which are obviously more creatively interesting. And so I started using that capital that I was generating to fund the projects that I wanted. And that was a really slow climb. Digital had just started coming out, and DVCs weren't exactly a thing yet. They were just sort of coming up. And we're talking about 2014, 2015 now. So
how did that commercial affect you? Do you hate that work, or do you still like it?
I detested it. I absolutely, even to this day, I think it's probably one of the major contributing factors to turning me off of music entirely.
Really?
Yeah. Just the kind of sheer regurgitative and backward looking vision, lack of vision rather, that the people in charge have that make commercials regarding music specifically. I'm not going to take any jabs at the rest of their work, but whoever's in charge doesn't really consider music to be something that can be in and of itself inspiring to the piece of film or video. It always feels like, oh, that guy did this thing in that ad and it was a big success. Can you do the same thing? Follow this trend and we'll do fine. And that also seems to be the general sort of malaise that our creatives have. It's generally backwards looking, and Coke Studio is the same, or Pepsi Battle of the Bands is the same. It's looking back at what past successes we've had and trying to capitalize on those instead of investing on a larger, longer term vision in which the new and the exciting can actually be that for the audience as well, new and exciting. So that kind of regurgitative thing really was just like, okay, just check the boxes, do what they want, and get it over and done with. Take the money and run, essentially. But what brought me joy was then working on the projects that I liked, and one of which was trying to better the space in terms of its acoustics, try and build a better social media presence, try and build a team, try and build more of a vibe that was supportive and gave artists more opportunities. So essentially, I was just channeling all that money back into my passion projects. And so Live at True Brew came out of that. It started in 2012, and it was actually originally the brainchild of one Ravel Sattar, who was the drummer for Poor Rich Boy.
Achha.
He set up a small gig space at the guitar school with Hamza Jafri, and it was smaller than my room, and just the fact that it was possible, like, immediately kind of struck me as, wait, I have all of this space. What am I doing? So I approached Ravi, and I said, listen, can we set this up at my place as well? And he said, yes. And he helped me kind of get the stools, set up some lights, kind of do up the space as best as we could within whatever limited means we had. And then we just kind of started from there. So a lot of credit to him for being generous with this idea and helping me put it together. And then we just kind of ran with it. And as we started doing it, it was really amazing because these bands from we featured a Cuban band, we featured a jazz drummer from Holland, we featured a bunch of musicians, music acts. We had a big band, a brass band from New Orleans. The embassy started kind of sending us their acts, any kind of exchange, cultural exchange acts that they had. And so it became kind of a vibrant, really interesting space where we had all these new bands coming out from out of the country, and then also our local independent scene. And from there, it just grew and grew and kind of became its own thing. And then I had the idea that we should be recording this stuff and putting it online. And unfortunately, when we did our first string of concerts, the YouTube ban kicked in 2012.
Right on cue.
Right on cue. Like, we were literally just about to release on the eve of it. And so I had to kind of put that stuff on Vimeo for a while. Vimeo just didn't really have the kind of traction that YouTube did. So for that 4 or 5 year period, we didn't really do any recordings. We just did the gigs. And then when YouTube started opening up, then we resumed. And I realized, okay, well, video is really picking up. Facebook wanted to jump into doing video as well. And it was kind of really becoming the sort of prime medium online. And so there was an idea to develop all of these as live concerts and put that on a dedicated channel. And that channel became True Brew TV. And True Brew TV's sort of larger vision was to become sort of an online music magazine with interviews, with small sort of insights into every artist's process, into kind of doing profiles, doing live concerts and their videos, and just generally kind of expanding on the world that I was working in. And I think that's kind of like I by the end of like 2018, I was just done with everything that I wanted to do with it.
Why? As in, you talked about the brick wall before. What was the brick wall? Was it all of these things just hitting at the same time?
I just felt like there was no other way to grow from that point onwards. I kind of saw myself perpetuating this cycle on a personal level, where I was like unhappy doing all these shitty commercials, trying to use that to funnel the money into the things that I found joy in. But even those things started being less and less rewarding because I was so generally unhappy. So that kind of catches up to you, It does. And also, it's such a thankless job, dude. Like, I really think back to all the people that I helped, and nothing. No letters of thanks. No. Not that I want any, but I think there should. I don't really know how to like. There's no way for me to put, okay, this is what I want in return. This is the kind of thanks I want. There's nothing specific, but I just feel like it felt to me that it became a sort of being taken for granted in a way. Okay, True Brew's always going to be there. True Brew's always going to support. If we ever need anything, we can go to True Brew. It's fine. It's all happening. And that was great for a while, but after a while I was like, okay, fuck off.
Right.
Both of you. Yeah. Because I was also ignoring a lot of the things that I wanted to do. Like, I wasn't doing any of my own music. I was purely kind of functioning as this foundation for everyone else to build their careers off of. And
right.
After a while, it just becomes...
That can be tiring after a while.
It was exhausting. It was exhausting. And also, it was financially just impossible to uphold because I wasn't planning to continue doing commercials. So where was I going to get the money to continue supporting all of that? And so it's just, I was done. And don't make me go into specifics.
No, I won't.
I just want the tapas that I've had to face from various musicians.
Give me one.
I will not.
No, give me one.
No, this is public record.
You don't have to mention any names.
Oh, I think we should do a whole other segment on this, है ना?
एक तो दे दो यार. There must be one good story.
There's many.
Give me the best one. Come on, bro.
I don't want to fan any flames. I've already left those people behind, and I'm kind of done with that chapter.
That's a good way to leave it, I guess.
Yeah, they can go fuck themselves.
Yeah. Okay, then give me one before we leave the True Brew topic.
Yeah.
Because I always see it very fondly as a gig space where I tried to go to. Whenever True Brew had a gig, I was always like, gotta be there.
Yeah, and that was a great source of fuel for the people that attended. I think it brought me a lot of joy to see people engaging with the music. That was really special.
Yeah. And seeing as there's not much to do in this place, in this town,
absolutely.
it was always something that I was like, well, we have to go there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. But is that the most positive aspect of the whole thing? If you can look at it holistically as a endeavor, what was one thing that you pick out and be like, you know what, that's something I take away from it as being really positive?
Oh no, I have a lot of pride for the things that we accomplished. I think True Brew's major contribution was to encourage alternate forms of music, and whether people acknowledge that or not, that was a significant contribution that no one else has been able to match, dare I say.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt you because one thing I really liked about True Brew was the sound was great, but also you gave bands like 2 days of rehearsal beforehand.
I did, yes.
That's not standard, it seems to me.
No, that's not standard at all. I did it because mainly I like to curate a show. It's important for me to know what the material is.
Right.
So I would set up on a Thursday with them, and then we'd rehearse that evening, and I'd get to understand the material, and then we'd do a second rehearsal on the day.
Because if a band
was
bombs,
shorter.
it looks bad for you.
Yes, of course. Because that quality was really important to me.
Yeah.
And that was true even for my studio productions. I wanted the quality to be of a global standard. And that's why also the sort of the acoustics of the space were really important, because I wanted the sound to be tight and clear and clean. So it was crucial for me to have that experience for people attending, because that would then bring the right kind of people and then the right kind of vibe to the show itself. And that was, I think, palpable when you kind of attended the show. The audience's enthusiasm was really what kept me going through a lot of those years. And I look back at that really fondly. But I also so many of my collaborations with many musicians, many friends, those were very, very good times, very fond times. I still look back on them and think, well, yeah, that was magical. And, we made this song or we made that song. And, I can still go back and listen to it and be like, this is like an unparalleled experience so far in my life. So, yeah, I mean, I think that I definitely hold very fond memories for it. But I do think that were it not for True Brew, we would have been robbed of a lot of the kind of music that we now see coming. Mm-hmm. I think I need to give myself the credit and kind of put my imposter syndrome to the side and say, okay, well, every action that's positive has a snowball effect. We did 2 independent music festivals, Storm in a Teacup.
Yes. I didn't go to that. I always feel heavy FOMO.
Were you in town?
I was not here.
Yeah,
no.
you weren't here.
Yeah.
And they were very successful. Even to me, I still marvel at how well they turned out. The second one, unfortunately, got rained out for the last 2 bands. But the first one was the weather was perfect and everything was great. We had some technical hitches, but nobody seemed to care. And, I can really say that despite the kind of wanting to blow my brains out because of the stress of literally putting those festivals up by myself, was worth it because of how they were received and how powerful they were in making good memories for people.
Yeah.
But on the basis of that, I got the best compliment ever from the Lahore Music Meet team, saying that if they hadn't seen Storm in a Teacup, they would never have done Lahore Music Meet.
No way.
I was just floored, because that's my favorite music event.
That's the snowball
ever.
event.
Yeah. And that is the snowball effect, right?
Yeah,
you see one thing and then it inspires you, and then you move on to do something else which somebody else sees, and then so on and so forth.
Right.
And so I'm very proud of having contributed what I contributed for that.
Awesome. There's an interview with Frank Zappa, I think, where he's talking about how the management at the top of the music industry in America.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
So initially he says that before, I don't know what time period this was. I guess
he's talking about the 60s, 70s, the record label era. Essentially.
The record label era, where the big wigs at the top were like, I don't know what these kids are doing. We don't understand their music at all.
Get all of it.
Yeah, but they're into it, and there's this distance between what the boomers are listening to and what the people are listening to. And so they were like, listen, we're just going to give the money to the people who seem to the artists themselves.
Well, actually, they cast the net wide. That was the biggest. It's funny because Zappa says the dinosaurs did better than these millennial.
Right. So that's what I was about to say. Let me just complete his thing, because he said that now they have all these cool hipster people in these big positions
who think they know.
Yeah, I know what the kids want. Hello, how do you do, fellow kids?
Yeah.
And but because they think they know what people want, they actually end up being more regressive, because they're actually the kids want this thing that I thought.
You're force feeding them, essentially.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can possibly predict how tastes will change. But what you can do is you can ride the wave.
Right.
Instead of restraining it and holding it back and saying 20 साल पहले जो चीजें successful थी वो भी होंगी, वो भी चीजें पसंद हैं.
Yeah.
That's bullshit, frankly. But what the record labels did, which was interesting, was they cast the net wide. They didn't know what was going to be a success, but one success would pay for all of the rest of their experiments. And frankly, all of these shows could easily follow that model if they were to diversify. But I don't think they understand the meaning of diversification. Even when they say, okay, we're going to get new producers, they're all kind of making the same music. Mm-hmm. So that's not diversification.
Right.
And really, I think tastes are built upon risk. They are built when people say, okay, you know what? That stuff on the fringe, the counterculture, this is going to be big in 10 years. Let's be the first ones to pick that out and ride it. Instead of saying, we are risk averse, we're never going to throw money at something that we don't understand, and therefore just keep doing the same thing over and over for the next 12 years and hope that people enjoy it. Well, there's a diminishing return there, as we've seen with Coke Studio.
Yeah.
So,
so we just need to find someone to ride the wave.
Well, you know, I mean, here's the thing. It's also so cliquish. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of sort of industry, what would you want to call it? It's self-serving, essentially. They only want to pick the people that will help them make either money or prestige or whatever. And so it ends up kind of being the same people over and over again. And that's not to the fault of the producers, the music producers themselves. I think this is more of a corporate situation where the agencies and the corporates are concerned. There seems to be much more of like, okay, this guy's my friend, let's bring him in.
Right.
And sometimes that doesn't work. So, yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
This is not about merit.
Yeah.
If it was about merit, we would be far, far ahead of where we are now.
Well, that's True Brew. I want to talk about your Generation ad because I don't know why. Here's the thing: like I watched it, and in my obviously whenever I watch an ad, it's just my nature that I
hate it.
I hate it.
Same.
My default position is Hotu. Yeah. Like
especially when it's just like voiceovers and people saying and then passing the product. And it's like, God, where's the story?
Yeah.
This is not a story. You know, there's no sort of emotion here.
Yeah. But so my general default position is to be cynical about it. I watched the ad that you did, and I was like, man, that's really nice. I just really enjoyed it, and the music was great as well. Obviously, you were taking an old folk tune and then redoing it.
Yeah.
What was that? Was the first big ad you directed as a filmmaker?
As a director, yes. So it was my second big project in the sense that I'd already done a short film, which was my final project at the New York Film Academy, but that's obviously
Man wakes up.
Sorry?
Man wakes up.
Woman.
Turns off his alarm.
No alarm.
Woman wakes up.
It was generally my sort of first big project as a director. But Generation's a really cool team to work with.
I'm going to bleep out the brand name every time you say it.
Sure. Generation. They're a really cool brand to work with because they understand the idea that alternative narratives have more of an emotional resonance than this usual bullshit.
Look at you sucking up to the brand.
What do you mean? They let me do my thing, which is why
really?
Yeah, absolutely. They're not they don't have an agency. Everything they do is in-house. So you're working directly with the team. The idea was sort of started in a certain place by them, and then I was able to run with it with my team and kind of make something new out of it. And so it was really kind of synergetic and truly collaborative in that way, especially with the art and the production design was concerned. And they didn't interfere with how I wanted to shoot it. They didn't interfere with how I wanted to edit it. They didn't interfere with the process. They only kind of encouraged and helped sculpt it into what it became. And that kind of that's the most healthy form of work or a process that I've ever done commercially, in which there's faith in all the parties. Okay, you're doing this is your project, you run with it and you make it the best you can. And then the kind of stuff that they come back with it's another level, you know, because they're not kind of providing a service. Everybody involved in that wanted to make it their own. And you can't ask for a better team than that, honestly. Like
that's such a strange phrase you use, because I was speaking to Ali Noor recently. I just on the phone for his new single that came out, and he was like, all the commercial projects I've done, he enjoys doing them, but he says he called himself, well, I'm just a service provider for that. Right? They're essentially contracting your service for that, for what they require. Whereas that's not really what fulfills a creative person.
Well, A.R. Rahman said the same thing recently. He said, you have to have faith in your creatives. If you've hired someone to do the job, let them do their fucking job. Instead of this bullshit about you're a business graduate.
Mm.
What the fuck do you know about composing a shot? What do you know about editing? What do you know about music production? What do you know about composition? You may have taste. You can say, okay,
business graduates out there
yeah,
losing
no,
their minds.
it's the same thing. Like you're saying, some hip, cool millennial running the show thinks he knows better, does not, unfortunately. And I think that lack of faith kills creativity. So really, I think the best kind of projects that come up are ones in which creatives are allowed to flourish and do what they do best.
Last question, because we're almost at the end. What's next for you? What's next for True Brew, and what's next for you as a creative person yourself?
Well, True Brew, I don't know what's next for True Brew, to be honest. I really don't. I can't say anything. I don't know what's happening with public gathering and events as such. So I can't say anything about that. I don't know how long I'll keep
do a
this
COVID
space.
test before every True Brew game.
I don't know if I'm really that bothered with that. So what I'm really working on right now is I'm developing screenplays for short films and a web series, and I'm looking for producers and financiers to finance those projects, and I am looking to build a voice that wants to tell these Pakistani stories to an international audience. So essentially looking at world cinema.
World cinema. So not Pakistani, not Pakistani.
Well, no, I'd show them here, but
Right.
my main sort of thrust would be to set it up or set myself up as a director that makes world cinema.
Okay, interesting. Actually, last question, because you said that, you slipped that in at the end. I was having a conversation with the deal by we did it on the transmissions, where we were talking about the soft image of Pakistan and how when people make stuff the perspective is external.
Yes.
So you end up creating something that is for someone else's eyes rather than the eyes that you were essentially the story is about. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, the stories are very, very core human stories. So it's not that there will be any kind of alienation or anything like that from within our local community and within the international audience. I don't think that's really like you're missing the point of the story if you feel like it's if you're making something that's alienating that core value. So of course there is something to be said for the circumstance and the exact situation, the specific situation that your characters in your film might find themselves in. But having said that, I think the story is universal because they are human stories. They are about human experiences, and you have to. I think it's important for Pakistan to talk about the real stories that our people live through. And I think it's important to show the world what those real stories are in their authentic form as opposed to the soft image. The soft image is a lie.
Pandering.
It's pandering, yeah. So I don't want to pander, essentially. I would rather tell authentic stories of people's experiences here.